Hi, DS3 TV. We are back with another video. This one is history summarized Egypt, and yeah, this is going to be really good. Probably, it's going to be Blue Talking from Overcast Productions, and yeah, let's get into it. And yeah, also subscribe to the channel. Want to get to 10,000 subscribers, and at 10,000 subscribers, I will give you guys a treat by seeing me in pain. I will be having the hot ones hot sauce and, you know, trying to do that trend. I'll find a creative way to put that into a video. And, yeah, so that's going to happen when we get to 10,000. So, yeah, let's get into it. And, also subscribe to, also, follow my Twitch, you know, go on there. I stream every day. It differs what time I stream though, throughout the week. Just look at my schedule on there. I have the link in the description down below. It's twitch.tv/Diana and yeah, you will see it on my schedule when I'm streaming. Because I'm making a new schedule. I'm making a new streaming schedule because I don't know how the one I have now is gonna work out. So yeah, let's get into it.
And king of the South and North, Ptolemy the Fifth. Oh, hey, didn't see you there. I was just doing some light reading. Fun timing, actually, because after Napoleon stumbled onto this giant multilingual rock while on campaign in 1799, the Egyptian hieroglyphs were first translated from the matching Greek inscription exactly 200 years ago in 1822. Our ability to read the language opened the floodgates to modern Egyptology, and an archaeological discovery of that magnitude was only matched by Howard Carter finding the exquisitely preserved tomb of King Tut in 1922. But beyond the surface-level aesthetics of fancy pictures, mummies, and giant D4s in the middle of the desert, what's really the story of ancient Egypt? Well, in celebration of Egyptology's double centennials, let's do some history. Now, before all this shiny modern scholarship, ancient observers...
It is their double centennial. So, yeah.
Had written plenty of accounts, but despite the best attempts of Herodotus' Histories and Manetho's Egyptica, these were outside perspectives on ancient Egypt. Even the name comes from Greek, Aegyptos, whereas the original name is Kemet, referring to the fertile black soil along the banks of the Nile. As with the name, so too was all of ancient Egyptian society defined by this one water source. The Nile's annual floods deposited new layers of silt on the surrounding land, which made Egyptian farms the most abundant and consistent in the entire ancient Near East. Once grown, crops could easily travel by ship, and whosoever had the biggest boat essentially had instant control of the entire river and the ability to govern everyone within line of sight of it. Which was everyone. With one easy source for water, food, trade, and power, that's the core criteria for civilization, so we're in business. Consequently, one quirk of Egyptian geography is that south, where the river started, is up, while north, where the river branches into the delta.
Which was always like, whenever I learned about Egypt, which I love learning about Egypt, like Egyptian culture and like history, that was always so weird when I first learned about it. Like Upper Egypt is like, you know, the lower one, and Lower Egypt is the top. Like, that's so weird to me. I don't know if that was weird to like anybody else when they like first got into like Egyptian, like learning about like Egypt and like Egyptian history. I don't know if that was like something weird to everybody else too, but that was just something that was just weird to me, I guess. I don't know. So, you know.
Into the Mediterranean is down. So Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt are charmingly reversed. Plus, each one comes with a neat crown. Fine on their own, but better together as demonstrated by Narmer, who unified the crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt both figuratively and literally. The man smushed the crowns together, becoming the first proper king of Egypt. We know this from King List, recorded later on, where he's referred to as Menes, which we used to think was a different person, but he's probably the same. And we also have what's called the Narmer palette, an artistic depiction of Narmer unifying Egypt. It's not quite clear where strict history ends and legend begins, but it vividly and kind of brutally tells the story as Egyptians understood it. And just as cool is how right out of the gate we have art in profile, the two crowns, hieroglyphic writing, and Falcon Boy Horus. By the Third Dynasty, things got even more on brand as the pharaohs started building pyramids. Working from earlier styles of big stone masonry and possibly inspired by Mesopotamian architecture, King Djoser built the first stepped pyramid in Egypt. After further experiments, one of which collapsed in on itself, oops, the kings
That must have been tough. I would have been like, imagine like the first one that you build, class and all stuff. But that tells you something though. That's a life lesson. Don't give up because of the first time that you tried something didn't work. Because if the Egyptians first time they tried pyramids collapsed in on themselves, you can do stuff. You know, you can do it. It's here.
So the 4th dynasty built the big fancy pyramids at Giza, which in their day would have been coated in white limestone and capped in gold. As a pure architectural achievement, the pyramid...
That's so fire though. Like just looking at it like from like the past and like how it looks in the game that I know that is from Assassin's Creed. It looks amazing in the game, so I can only imagine like how amazing like the limestone and stuff would look if it wasn't like covered in layers and layers of sand. That would be like so cool. I don't know if I was just out of the camera for a second.
It's are spectacular, but the reality is that's a lot of work for a dead guy, so later dynasties shifted focus to building temples and other more usable structures. Ancient Egypt didn't emerge fully formed, but it's impressive what does appear at the start of dynastic history, with the pleasantly terrifying implication that several core aspects of Egyptian culture go back not just to the Old Kingdom, but even before Narmer. I should specify, the term Old Kingdom, along with Middle and New Kingdom, are modern conventions to distinguish periods of dynastic continuity and general stability with the intermediate periods, where something or other goes wrong. The first intermediate period began at the tail end of the 6th dynasty, where King Pepi II was several decades into his reign and appeared to be going senile. So in the absence of central authority, nomarchs in charge of the provinces gobbled up power for themselves and even established their own local dynasties. Though they paid lip service to the kings in Heracleopolis and Thebes, as there were competing dynasties in different cities, the next 130 years was a provincial free-for-all until King Mentuhotep II up in Thebes conquered Lower Egypt to reunite North and South, booted out all the hereditary nomarchs and replaced them with new ones actually loyal to the king, and thus kicked off the Middle Kingdom. These next 3 centuries were pleasantly chill on the political front thanks to Mentuhotep's reforms, so the main development was cultural as literature got more popular and accessible. In the Old Kingdom, spells to be used by the pharaohs in the afterlife were inscribed on the walls and sarcophagi of pyramids, while in the intermediary period that expanded to include coffin texts, so that high-ranking officials outside the royal circle could have some assistance on their way into the afterlife. By the later Middle Kingdom, this slow democratization of the afterlife culminated in the Book of the Dead, a personalized dummy's guide to the underworld filled with spells and stories to be buried alongside an individual. This requires a fairly robust conception of the afterlife, otherwise we're just casting spells in the dark, so it's likely this literature developed in response to the growing cult of Osiris, the god of the dead. Beyond looking metaphorically down, Egypt also began looking outwards to their neighbors, as Senusret III conquered south along the Nile into Nubia while building trade relations with Mesopotamia. This was great until it slightly backfired, because when travelers, merchants, and migrants from the Levant came to settle in Lower Egypt in the latter decades of the Middle Kingdom, they realized that the 13th dynasty's authority wasn't all that strong and didn't extend very far beyond the capital city of Ishtawi. So in the absence of any meaningful resistance, some Canaanites declared a new dynasty, set up a new capital at Avaris, and started ruling Lower Egypt. Apparently, it was that easy, because about a century later, another Asiatic group called the Hyksos did the exact same thing. The pharaohs up in Thebes...
Wow, they really didn't, I mean, maybe they did care, but they just kind of were really chill about
Surely
that.
weren't thrilled, but they couldn't even handle a local mini-dynasty at Abydos, so when the Hyksos eventually rolled into Thebes around 1580, they were powerless to stop it. They almost had all of Egypt too, until a dynastic dispute back down in Avaris forced them to regroup, which gave the new 17th dynasty in Thebes time to rebuild and launch a counterattack. The first 2 kings of the war died on campaign, but the third guy made it work, fully reuniting Egypt under Theban authority and beginning the New Kingdom period. His first order of business was stopping that whole mess from happening again, so he conquered into the Levant to smack them around a little and make sure they didn't get ideas, as well as reconquering into Nubia to open the gold mines back up. Of course, there's more ways to get cash than ripping it out of the ground or stealing its spear points. There's the polite method of selling stuff, as enthusiastically practiced by the pharaoh queen Hatshepsut. She wound up on the throne after promoting herself from regent and is best known for launching a trading expedition to the land of Punt at the base of the Red Sea, as well as re-establishing trade routes with the Near East. All that incoming wealth financed one of the the biggest building programs in Egyptian history, with Hatshepsut embellishing existing temples like the one at Karnak, as well as making brand new structures like her triple-colonnaded Mortuary temple. This was a more efficient alternative to single-use pyramids because they were way the hell smaller, but also served as a site of public worship for the pharaoh after death while they themselves took a nice long nap in the Valley of the Kings. This didn't...
That looks so nice. Like, that looks immaculately
stop
nice.
the tombs from being robbed, but, well, neither did the pyramids, so why waste the effort? Back in the land of the living, Hatshepsut's stepson Thutmose III went on campaign after campaign after campaign to extend Egypt's dominion from down in Nubia all the way up to Syria. The kingdom became so fabulously wealthy that a Babylonian king once told Amenhotep III, "In your country, gold is like dust." While the pharaohs of the 18th dynasty were having a grand old time, they weren't the only ones with resources and power. See, after the expulsion of the Hyksos, the cult of the god Amun gained immense prestige as thanks for his help liberating Egypt, and he fused with the primary sun god to become Amun-Ra, the patron god of all Egypt. With that kind of clout, the priesthood of Amun's power rivaled only the pharaoh. There was one king who saw this process unfolding and tried to stop it, but he went just a smidge overboard with it. Amenhotep IV completely banned the worship of Amun-Ra, made a new capital away from Thebes in the Temple of Amun at Karnak, and promoted a new cult worshipping the sun disk Aten with whom only the pharaoh could commune, thus granting the renamed Akhenaten sole power, pun intended, over his newly diet monotheistic state. Unfortunately, his first and only act as autocrat was kind of nothing, so nobody was governing and the economy fell in the tank, and when the new pharaoh, Tutankhamun, undid all that Aten nonsense and got things back on track, everybody was relieved, especially the priesthood of Amun. But before that ominous plotline comes to a head, there's one more monarch on the list who puts all the rest to shame, and that is Ramses II. Coming in strong with stable governance, renewed
Yeah, Ramses, from what I hear, Ramses was actually a really good
trade,
leader.
plenty of building, and surprisingly robust international relations, the man did a lot with his 7 decades in power. He launched several campaigns into the Levant to consolidate his holdings and fend off the Anatolian Hittite Empire, and while his military operations were moderately successful, his military propaganda was outstanding. Ramses returned from the Battle of Kadesh proclaiming the greatest victory in Egyptian history with monuments dedicated to his glory, but the actual battle was basically a draw, and he didn't even take the city of Kadesh. He did, however, end up striking a formal peace treaty with the Hittites, which allowed him to turn his focus inward and get to building. Between a new capital in the Nile Delta, a gigantic mortuary temple in Thebes, and a complex way up the river in Nubia, Ramses shelled out on monuments all along the Nile like nobody could even dream, transforming the entire face of Egypt.
Hey, we're back. Yeah. So we're back, and the camera died, so, you know, that happens sometimes. But yeah, let's get back into the video. And
Timing that he got to it when he did, because in a half century, it all falls apart. Yeah, unfortunately for Ramses III, the crises were frequent and numerous. First were the invasions, or possibly just migrations, of various people.
I probably shouldn't have, I thought about this right before I turned on the camera. Probably shouldn't just have said Ramses. Ramses II was good. Ramses III, he had a lot of stuff going on with him, as you can see here. But yeah, Ramses II was really
Peoples
good.
from the northern Mediterranean, whom he begrudgingly allowed to settle in Sinai and the Levant. Meanwhile, overseas trade dried up because all the other civilizations of the late Bronze Age were in the process of collapsing, and all that fighting left the treasury low on funds, so the tomb builders went on strike. They did come back, but the fact that Ramses' main temple complex had defensive fortifications was a very bad sign. And to cap it off, a conflict between potential heirs ended with Ramses getting assassinated by his great wife. Well, one of them. That was partly the issue. After that, subsequent rulers were no match for persistent droughts, nor the priesthood of Amun, who were now fully... well, one.
That I was gonna look at that. Polygamy was typical of Great Royal. With a Great Royal wife, Disney is the one whose kid becomes the next king. Ramses III stupidly had 2 great royal wives, which invited a succession crisis. Why? He just wanted chaos. I feel like he yearned for chaos and he got it.
That was partly the issue. After that, subsequent rulers were no match for persistent droughts, nor the priesthood of Amun, who were now fully in charge of Upper Egypt from their base in Thebes and taking on royal titles to fit their newfound stature. There was still an actual pharaoh down in the Delta, but crazy coincidence, he was related to the high priest.
In Egyptian art, hieratic scale communicated power via relative size. The king on the right appears as tall as the priest on the left, but look closely, the king is standing on a box. In order to be level with the priest, the king is no longer in charge. Ah, that makes sense. That's some political trickery right
So
there.
silly! The breakdown of central authority in the Third Intermediate Period wasn't that bad of a time on its own, but it left Egypt wide open to foreign rule, as Libyans who settled in the Delta in centuries prior wound up ruling for 2.5 dynasties. The kingdom intermittently came together before falling back apart, and this tempting opportunity caught the eye of the Nubians from the Kingdom of Kush. On paper, once again not great, because after King Kashta installed his daughter as chief priestess of Amun, his son King Pi conquered the whole of Egypt and established a new dynasty of Kushite rulers. Thing is, these guys had a long relationship with Egypt and actually really admired their civilization, so although Egypt was ruled by foreigners, they governed well, built more pyramids, and preserved the culture, amounting to probably the best century Egypt has had since the New Kingdom. Unfortunately, other conquerors were on the way, as when the Assyrian Empire marched out from Mesopotamia into the Nile Delta in the 660s BC to sack Memphis and Thebes before installing a puppet dynasty and calling it a day. The Kushites withdrew back to their homeland up the river, leaving Egypt to figure itself out. Despite some success in resisting Assyrian influence, Egypt would remain at the mercy of forces far beyond their control. Later that century, the Assyrians got conquered by the Babylonians, who became the threat du jour, but then they got yoinked by the Achaemenid Persian Empire, who then also conquered Egypt and actually kept it this time. Egypt was no stranger to rule by foreigners, but this was the first time that the Kingdom of the Nile was merely a distant corner of a much larger empire. Granted, this was the Persian Empire, so there were actually
Literally, all you have to do is pay taxes, and then you can do whatever
with
you
Egyptian
want.
culture, but it's the principle of the thing, you know? So naturally, Egyptians tried their hand at breaking free, and with help from Greek mercenaries, they snuck in a little half-century of independence. Persia did eventually come back, but they wouldn't stay for long, because Alexander, the Macedonian twink, came on in to build an even bigger empire. But he died, like, really fast. So in 323, his general Ptolemy snagged a piece of the shattering Macedonian Empire and became the new pharaoh of Egypt. His Ptolemaic dynasty had its share of ups and downs and catastrophic inbreeding, but it honestly did pretty well for itself, as the coastal capital of Alexandria became the pinnacle of Hellenistic culture. Although the ruling class was almost exclusively Greek, they respected Egyptian culture, honored their gods, and issued royal decrees in both languages, which is why we have documents like the Rosetta Stone. The golden glow of Ptolemaic Egypt reached as far as Rome, who admired the culture, yes, but also realized that an agricultural powerhouse like the Nile would fit perfectly into their growing empire. So even with a valiant last huzzah by Queen Cleopatra, Egypt became a province of Rome. Despite this rather substantial political change, the biggest shock to Egyptian culture came 3 centuries later with the spread of Christianity. Much more severe than the reforms of Akhenaten, Egyptian pagan temples were converted into churches or abandoned outright, and the rise of Coptic as the main written language made hieroglyphs obsolete. More than 2 centuries before the Muslim conquest in 641, the Egypt of the pharaohs was gone, conquered not by a man, but a god. And with our 3,500 year chronology completed, that's a wrap on the history of ancient Egypt. It's astounding that even with dynasties worth of growth and change and turmoil, the core of that culture held steady and their civilization always came back stronger. Still, despite the mountains of evidence we found with modern archaeology, there's a fundamental mysteriousness to all that grandeur that somehow makes it even more fascinating. As the more we learn, the more we want to learn. Ugh, stupid learning, being interesting. I tell you, this whole thing is just one big pyramid scheme.
That is a definite pun intended.
Oh, God. Thank you so much for watching. This video was...
That was a good video. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. And yeah. Should be 2 videos up as of now, because I'm gonna start doing 2 videos a day instead of just 1 video. So yeah, talk to you guys in the next video. Subscribe to the channel when we get to 10K subscribers, so you know, can make you guys a little bit happier. And you guys get to see me in pain with the hot sauce. So yeah, talk to you guys in the next video, and peace.